Nigeria has received different tranches of recovered loot from foreign countries in the last few years. Efforts are still on to repatriate some other looted funds. A report by the Monitoring Transparency and Accountability in the Management of Returned Assets mantra on utilization of funds last week disclosed that more than 700,000 households of poor and vulnerable Nigerians received 16.3 billion naira in 4 months, January to April, from recovered $322.5 million Abacha Loot. Citizens are calling for the judicious use of these funds as well as accountability of recovered funds. Joining me via Skype from Edo State is David Ogala, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice and Senior Advisor, Corruption and Governance to Africa Bar Association. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Now, according to reports, over 700,000 households of the poor and vulnerable have received monies between January and for 4 months now, January till February, March, April, and in some states of the country. Is this a judicious use of the monies repatriated? You have been monitoring the dispensing of this monies. Talk to us. How so?
Yes, thanks very much. First, again, I want to thank TVC for the opportunity to also share our recent report, which we just released last week. The mantra report, which again provides opportunity for citizens to be aware of how the restituted Abacha 2, which is the $322.5 million, is being utilized in Nigeria. First, the report provides details on number of households that have benefited from the Abacha Loot, which was used during the COVID-19 palliative as a result of the president's intervention. The president announced in the wake of COVID-19 that the Abacha Loot should be used as COVID-19 palliative. And that again made it possible for the National Transfer Office to pay 4 months. Before now, they were paying 2 months. So from January to March, April was paid. That makes it 20,000 naira per each beneficiary. And in each household who benefited from this, we did a spot check across the entire country, and this led to this report we have produced. And what we have seen so far, the total number of enrolled households on the National Beneficiary Register in the 24 states where payment was made. We also looked at the total number of households paid in the 24 states and percentage of households paid and the total amount paid and share of the $322.5 million in total amount paid out. All these figures are contained in our report just to demonstrate to Nigeria where we are with the Abacha 2 disbursement and how it has benefited the people in Nigeria. Now, your question again, is this very helpful? Yes, it is very helpful. Has it really helped to address poverty? Yes, it has. But the question is that millions of Nigerians are poor. Even the National Bureau Statistics data have proven that over 40% of Nigerians are poor and they live below dollar. And so the amount of people who has benefited from the Abacha is very small compared to the level of poverty in the country. What it means is that the government need to make more investment in social protection program in Nigeria.
All right. The report says these monies were distributed to the poor and the vulnerable, like you rightly pointed out. But at this point, a majority of Nigerians would tell you that almost every Nigerian is vulnerable as a result of the COVID-19. Talk to us about the indices that determines who is vulnerable and who is poor with this disbursement now.
First, in the first place, the Nigerian Social Protection Program, as supported by the World Bank, do have a framework for identifying the very poor in the society. And so we have the Nigerian Social Register. And in that Nigerian Social Register, there are processes that the government have adopted which is one of the best practice they use in identifying the poor. And it's very participatory because they go to the community and they use a targeting framework to identify the very poor, and the poor themselves participate in the process. And so that is how the Nigerian government, through NASCO, they work closely with each state governments, who also provide some level of infrastructural support that leads to the identification of the poor. And then the names are assembled in the Nigerian social register. And once the social register is assembled from the state, it goes into the national database of the social register. It is from this Nigerian social register that the National Cash Transfer Office picks up, mine the data for the poor, the household that they use in disbursing this money. And so it is assumed that those names who appeared in the Nigerian social register are people who live below $1, according to the international standard. And so this is how the names comes about, and this is how government has implemented it. But you will recall that during the height of the COVID-19, the president also encouraged the National Cash Transfer Office and NASCO to scale up the Nigerian social register, which was 2.6 million before now, to 3.6 million. And those are an attempt to meet with the high level of widespread of poverty in the country. Now, if you look the number that we're talking about, compare it to the 40% of those who live below $1 a day in Nigeria, you will see that it hasn't got to anywhere. This is really big challenge. And so many poor Nigerians are not yet benefiting from the current Abacha disbursement. And this has raised a lot of negative response, even from the National Assembly, from key stakeholders across the country. And then the imbalance in the sharing of the Abacha Loot in terms of the number of states that are benefiting from the North compared to the South. That has also again brought some negative perceptions about the disbursement of the Abacha Loot. That for me is something that needs to be addressed within the context of the fact that most state governments from the southern part of the country did not provide the necessary political support for the process in developing the social register. And that is the real main reason why you found out that most states from the North who participated actively are the one currently benefiting from it.
All right, talk to us about COVID-19 funds. Now, you're also monitoring that. How far is that going, especially with regards to transparency and accountability, which a lot of Nigerians are calling for?
Well, we, in terms of technically, mantra is focused on returned asset, which was used for the COVID-19 as a palliative. But as to what government exactly is spending for COVID-19 palliative, we are not monitoring that. But we haven't seen any data across the country that one can point to. And this is where we think that we need to encourage the government to be transparent on disclosing what exactly amount of money that is going to the poor across the entire country during the COVID period. That data need to be provided to Nigeria, and it will help the government to demonstrate their political support to issue of poverty in the country. But what we have seen that, and that is the reason why we're calling on the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, who has gone around the country distributing the COVID-19 palliative, to also be transparent in our disclosure, because it's very important, because at the end of the day, he will be held accountable. Our government will be held accountable. Nigerians want to know how COVID palliative was spent across the entire country. And so we hope that as time goes on, the government will be transparent enough to demonstrate by providing more data to the Nigerian public as to how COVID-19 palliative was distributed across the and those who benefited from it, because it's very important. And then we need to separate the difference. What we see in the feed was that it was Abacha Loot too that was returned back to Nigeria that was used as palliative. Whether government also used Nigerian own money for the palliative is up to Nigerian government to demonstrate that to the public of Nigeria.
Earlier, you talked about state governments ensuring that the register covers a lot of persons. Are you engaging state governments to ensure that the social register is expanded to cover a lot of Nigerians who fall under the bracket of the poverty and the vulnerability line? And also, are we also expecting more repatriations of this loot?
First, again, in your first question, yes, we're engaging. Part of this media advocacy we're doing is to encourage the southern government, particularly the South state government and the Southeast governors, that they should take very seriously the issue of social investment program. They have responsibility in their various states to work closely with NASCO and the NCTO, the National and Cash Transfer Office, to ensure that they help to build the state's social register, which the National Social Register will be based on. And so it is in their interest, and we're using this medium to appeal to the southern state governors that they should take this very seriously. It's in their interest because these resources will benefit the poor in their various states. That's one. And then on your second questions about, you raised about the Abacha 3. Yes, we are about to launch the independent monitoring of the Abacha 3. As you know, after the MOU between Nigeria and Jersey and U.S. government, the $311 million have been restituted back to Nigeria. It's going to be used for 3 major projects across the country. One of the first projects is the Abuja-Kano Road, Lagos-Ibadan Road, and then the second Niger Bridge. Those are the 3 major infrastructural projects that Abacha 3 will be used for. And one of the first things we are doing, we're keeping eyes on the federal government procurement of third-party monitoring. We are also looking into the existing infrastructural investment that has happened before the restricted Abacha 3. Then the third leg of our own monitoring, we're also going to be looking how government is engaging the agency that is responsible for disbursing of this money. And hopefully we'll be releasing our preliminary report that will demonstrate how government is actually implementing the MOU that is signed with the U.S. government and the Jersey government.
Now, according to the report, there were issues of intimidation of beneficiaries by community leaders for some to part with some of the allowances. Perhaps you might want to make Nigerians better understand some of these challenges that were faced while you were monitoring the process, the challenges that beneficiaries faced and you also faced while monitoring the process.
Well, first, again, in our report, which we have also shared with TVC, first, there are key observations and follow up with recommendations. And key among that observation was the issue, as you know, we were in a trying period, the COVID period. It was not planned for, it was unexpected, and it was a key critical issue in the process of trying to disburse the money to the beneficiary across the country. In our observation, we observed that there were issues of intimidations of beneficiary by community leaders to part with some amount of the allowances for the community and themselves for enrolling them in the program. The cooperative organizations were getting between 2,000 to 4,000 from beneficiary. And then we also have the poor understanding of the cash transfer programs and the evolution of the social register. People were not very aware how they get registered, so that raised a lot of questions. Beneficiaries were paid 20,000 naira each, covering January to April, like I mentioned earlier on before. And then the issue of National Assembly, not very conversant with the social register. That raised an issue between the presidency and the National Assembly. Was also a very hot issue during the period. And payment agents were short of cash in some instances. And we also had this situation where in communities, deductions of various forms ranging from 500 to 2,000 were also discovered. And CCT officials informed DSS and corporate was arrested and ordered to refund the money within 24 hours. So those are where the issues are. Where some of the key recommendations we made were in future payment, issues of crowd management, delay and lateness in payment, ineffective COVID-19 measures around payment location should be put into consideration. And great emphasis should be placed to public awareness around the grievance mechanism, because people are not aware that if, for example, your name appears in the Nigerian Social Register and you were supposed to benefit and you didn't benefit, you do have a framework they call the grievance mechanism to report your case. And areas where there are discrepancy, we can also use the grievance mechanism. So there need to be public awareness about the grievance mechanism. Then the National Cash Transfer Office should critically and regularly review and clean up the payment register to ensure that dead persons are delisted. Then strong CSO advocacy to ensure that this imbalance between the North and South can be addressed. For example, there is need to be CSO strong advocacy across the country to encourage state governments from the southern part of the country to sign on to this process. And additional payment points should be created in some of the states to to address the issue of overcrowding during payment. This will also ensure that payment points are made closer to beneficiaries' primary location. And then finally, NCTO should expedite action in addressing the challenge that led to the payment not happening in a state, particularly like Edo State. They were not paid. The reason why they were not paid are obvious, and that need to be addressed quickly as possible so that those who are supposed to benefit from Edo State and the other 7 states can also access their money.
But Nigerians are concerned that the sustainability of this might be a challenge, and so the government perhaps should be looking at focusing on critical infrastructure that Nigerians can benefit from, especially when it comes to creation of jobs.
When Abacha 2 was designed, it was with a focus on the social protection program, the cash transfer program. Abacha 3 now is focusing on legacy projects like the 3 major projects I mentioned earlier on. And one of those legacy projects is the Abuja-Kano Road, and then the second one is the Lagos-Ibadan Road, and the third one is the second Niger Bridge. Those are major infrastructural projects. Now, the two are very important. Investing in the poor is very important. Investing in infrastructure is very important. Both are aimed at addressing development in the country. There's no one that is more important than the other. What is more important is about priority. Government has responsibility to address the issue of poverty in the country, and social protection program is a major option that government adopts around the world, including Brazil, Egypt, all the countries around the world. They are investing in their poor so that at least the inequality that exists can be addressed. Because once you have too many poor people in the country, you cannot talk about productivity.
And from what you have observed since you've been monitoring this, is this really addressing the inequality?
You see, Rome was not built today. We need to start from somewhere. Like I said, the number of poor people in the country is intimidating. As a matter of fact, you've heard that Nigeria is the equator of poverty in the world. So now, little money that has come from recovered assets won't be able to address the issue. Now, our government have only allocated 500 billion to social protection program in Nigeria. Is that amount enough? If you look the amount of money that government spend to run bureaucracy in Nigeria, is unacceptable. The COVID-19 have again exposed how government has poorly invested in the health sector. If we are to increase our capital investment in human development, government must make a deliberate policy, and that again brings to the political will of the leadership of the country. The amount of resources that is going for the poor is very small because they are not vocal, they are not organized, and people take an advantage of it. If you look at the amount of money government spend in taking care of the member of the National Assembly, compare that amount to what goes to the poor in the country, is unacceptable, it's shameful. The amount that goes to the poor is unacceptable. Nowhere in the world that you treat your poor the way Nigeria treats the poor in the country.
All right, David Ugola, thank you so much for speaking with us.